You can try putting it in the comments. I'm never going to understand overflow. As you know, I like my cheesecake.
Morning, it's Daz here. So this diary entry, what I wanted to talk to you about was my evolution in vaping in the past year and how much it's changed. And what got me thinking was, on Saturday I was given something which was an Arga tea to try out. And I'd been saying for a couple of weeks that I wanted to try out meshwick and coil, because I'd tried with silica and enjoyed it, and because obviously I'd not been starter to making the first coil, and I've made the coil, that I was ready to kind of go to the next step. And I noticed in chat as well over the last week that, you know, there's been a lot of things said and going on about cigalikes, and it's amazing that over a year that I've went from something like that to something like that. Ultimately what we're all looking for is to get the best vaping experience, I suppose, that gives us nothing but continuous pleasure. I can honestly say that with the likes of the rebuildables, I can understand why. But what I wanted to cover as well was still on how absolutely important something like this is. That is just as important as that. And here's why, in my opinion. When I first looked into vaping, and what many people will look at in vaping is something like this. Because when you're a smoker, you're so used to, if that makes sense. But when you fully get into vaping, it is a whole different experience. And this is just more or less a habit. Now, that's why I think that these are just as important, because when somebody is looking into vaping, the first thing that they're going to look at is something like that. And that is why these are just as important as these. Because if I first started vaping and I was looking at something like that, I wouldn't have touched it, because it didn't look and resemble anything like a tobacco cigarette. So it didn't interest me. And there was something that I heard on RY4 last night which was very true, and what that was saying is that, you know, there's a lot of people out there who vape but aren't watching vapor trails or listening to RY4, or, you know, they're not really involved with the vaping community. They're happy with the setup, and there's plenty of people who uses things like these and have been for an awfully long time, and they're happy with that, and they are just as important as everybody else. They've got no desire to do something like this, and a lot of people mentioned as well about vaping being a hobby, and yes, I agree to an extent about vaping being a hobby, but it's not just a hobby for me, it's a way of life as well. And I love everything about it, you know, I really do, but it's not just about being a hobby, it's a way of life to me, because I don't want to go back onto cigarettes. Again, it kind of brings me back about this thing that we've seen this week to do with the EU. Now, there's not a lot of change, but what was reassuring was that we've seen it from being that vaping's a really bad thing and ban it, to a lot of people suggesting and saying, well, hang on a minute, this may need a bit more investigation, which isn't a lot, but it's better than where it was, which is why we've got to continue doing what we're doing. We're getting the message out there, but we need to continue doing it, because a lot of the things to do with vaping as well is education. Now, that's where the good and the bad points come to do with this, because most new people who look at vaping, as I said before, will look at something like this. But a lot of people who don't know about electronic cigs will automatically think of something like this. If they've heard about it, this is the first thing that they're going to think of. They're not even going to remotely think of this. They're going to think of something like this. And that's why I think that when we talk to people, education is important. It was a bit of an annoyance when I watched the programme on the internet about it, and I think some guy from Germany or somewhere stood up and said, you know, about children drinking liquid nicotine. And that really, really annoyed me, because when he said that, instantly the first thing that came into my head was, well, what if there's a box of paracetamol on the table and the children took them? You know, it falls under exactly the same category. It's no different really, and it's down to the parent or guardian really to be responsible enough to move that out of the way. It's no different than a lot of other chemicals, you know, which are in the household. Not at all. So I just really, really wanted to point out about how cig-alikes, you know, are still very, very valid. You know, we can't rule any of them out. We really, really can't. Can't rule any of them out. They are all just as important to each other. And also what I've done is I've started mixing my own liquid. And the reason why I've done it is one of two reasons. One is to get flavours and strengths that I like. But secondly is cost. And what I'm hoping to do for the next diary entry is to rule out and see what it weighs up in cost in mixing your own, as to what it is by buying juices by the bottle from a vendor. I'm going to leave it like that for now, but really I just wanted to make this entry to do with about, you know, vaping as a whole and everything that's part of it, and we need to keep everything that's part of it. We don't need to get rid of the likes of these just as much as we want to keep these. It's all important. So I'm going to leave it there, and I will see you on my next entry.